Rosalynn Frederick, how are you doing?
Hey Jim, I'm doing really well. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. It's been, I'm not sure how many years. I'm sure you'll tell us here in a little bit.
Yeah,
Rosalind is one of 27 of us, men and women, who have either walked or ran across the country, and we consolidated our stories. We each have a chapter in this book, Across America on Foot, which comes out actually this week sometime on Amazon. So we're excited. And on this short interview, we're going to talk to you, Rosalind, and just ask you a few questions. We'll start out by saying, what in the world would make you want to run across America?
yeah, that's an interesting question. um, well, I've been thinking about this. You know, it's a bit of a journey. It's been a bit of a journey to that point. Um, I've I've always kind of been a runner. In high school, I was a sprinter, which I think I missed my real potential in high school because I think I would have done really well at distance if I had chosen that. But I didn't in high school. I chose sprinting. And after that is when I started doing more long distance running. So when I was in college. And I built up my mileage over the years and eventually became a marathon runner. I ran several marathons, my first being the Big Sur Marathon in California, which was absolutely beautiful. And ran several more over the following years, and really running became a big passion for me. It was a huge part of my life, and I was doing it on a daily basis, at times. So I was also a teacher at that time. I was teaching public school Spanish for about 7 years. And I came to the point where I realized that that wasn't exactly what I thought where my path should go. I wasn't enjoying it as much as I wanted to enjoy my career. I loved working with students, but there were many things about teaching Spanish and, public school teaching in general that I wasn't crazy about. So I was, at this turning point in my life, and at the same time, I had ended a pretty serious relationship that had been in my life, and I wanted an adventure. I wanted something that was going to kind of change the course of what I had been doing. Wanted a fresh start, and I knew I loved running, and travel had always been, has, and still is a huge part of my life as well. So I decided to kind of merge the two, and this crazy idea came to me about running across the country, strangely enough, through talking with a psychic. And I know that sounds a little bit weird. I don't know, that's just how it played out. And I was talking to this psychic, really looking for a new path in life and trying to figure out what was coming next for me. And she kept talking about running. She kept talking about sports and, doing something athletic in my future, which I hadn't really thought about. She even talked about a book in the future, which is it even freaks me out now just thinking about it. And the last piece of this puzzle is that when I was a Spanish teacher, I had taken a trip to Costa Rica with my students, and it was incredible. We all had such a great time and really benefited from the experience. And I knew that there were lots of students that didn't really have the money to be able to do that. So if they wanted to. So I decided that based on this conversation I had with the psychic that kind of got my, my mind thinking, based on my love of running and my love of travel, I decided to run across the country and to raise money for youth travel, which, my intention was to raise some money and to be able to create a fund so that young people could, use the funds if they wanted to do travel in their school years to, travel for study or travel for just international experiences while they were in middle school and high school. So,
what an awesome cause. I'm going to get the book off the screen here so we can blow us up. But the book, Across America on Foot, is available on Amazon literally any day now. So Tell us what year you did it and where you started from and where you finished your run across America.
The year was 2013, and I live on the East Coast. I live in Massachusetts, so I drove all the way from Massachusetts out to California, and picked a kind of a random, area along the coast in California, the place where I thought it seemed like I could, make the shortest route across. And it started in a place called Grover Beach, California. That was on March 23rd, actually. So coming up on 7 years to the actual beginning of the run.
So when you were driving across country, you didn't even know exactly where you were going to start. You were just kind of winging.
No, I did, but the point that I chose before we left was, pretty random. I didn't choose it for any specific reason, but I did know when we were driving across where I was going to start. Yeah.
And some of us have gone across, like me, supported with a vehicle. Supporting us, which I say is like, the easy way. And a lot of people actually went across with a backpack or pushing a baby stroller. And I know, because I was fortunate enough to meet you along your route in Ohio, that you also ran supported, correct?
Yeah, I did. I ran supported. I think if I were ever to do it again, I would run unsupported. And I'm not saying that I would ever do the whole thing again, but who knows? But yeah, it was, that was an interesting experience for me. And I'm sure running unsupported is also equally as challenging and exciting at the same time. But yeah, I did run with a support driver who drove my car and dropped me off at the beginning of the day and picked me up at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I did it that way too, with some stops along the way. And out west, where towns are 40, 50, 60 miles apart, it's a whole lot easier. But
Yeah.
I read your chapter, and I absolutely love your chapter. I guess because you were a teacher, you just have a great way of writing. But could you give us some of the highlights? Like, what was the best city or the best state or the best day of your crossing, and maybe a low spot also?
Yeah. Well, there were so many best things about the experience. I have to say, I absolutely love the Southwest. I love the desert landscapes. I don't know, it's always been something close to my heart, but I loved running through those desert landscapes and the canyon lands. That was definitely my favorite part of the run. So when I started turning up a little bit northeast to go to the Midwest, I also did hit, the really humid heat. And that was, I would say, as far as conditions go, that was the toughest part, was the humidity. I actually was so lucky in the 5 months that I was on the road, I only came across one rainy day along my whole 5-month journey, which is pretty incredible. I had some drizzles on other days, but only one real day full of rain. But one really amazing memory that comes to mind, because as there were so many generous people that we met along the way, some strangers, complete strangers, that would sometimes welcome us into their homes. And there was one really special memory that I have of this couple. It was in, I believe it was right at the southern part of Kansas, right after I had turned up from Texas, that area. And they were strangers, and my support driver had met them. I think probably just someone was outside doing some yard work. He had approached them and asked them, told them a little bit about what we were up to, and they were happy to welcome us into their home. And when I got there, they were very, very excited to show me that they had a whirlpool bathtub in their bathroom, and they told me I could use the jets. I could sit in there. They brought a CD player into the bathroom. The guy asked me if I liked Enya, and I said, yes, I like Enya. He brought the CD player and he turned it all the way up. He said, I want you to relax. I want you to have, a really relaxed evening. This, our home is your home. And he just left me in there with Enya blasting on the CD player and this jet stream bathtub to loosen up, all my muscles and keep me warm. And it was just such a wonderful, caring thing for a complete stranger to do.
Yeah, all of us on the road call those people trail angels, and every one of our stories has dozens and dozens of people in there. But I have to go back to something that you mentioned, that you said one day, really one day of rain you ran in, and I had 3 days, and both of those are unbelievable, because last night I interviewed Lazarus Lake, who started the Barkley Marathons, and it's not live yet, but you'll have to watch it. And Lazarus was telling me he had 60 he had 60 days of, can you imagine running across country in 60 days of rain?
Wow,
Ran
I
through
can't. That
five
would have been a
five
whole
tornado warnings. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a drought year for me, and apparently it was a drought year for you as well, at least
Yeah.
the path that you took. Now, reading your chapter, I remember that you had one pretty serious injury, and I think it was pretty early on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a bit of a mystery, actually. That injury came within the first week, I believe, of the whole journey, and I can't help but think that it was related to the run that I had done that day, which was pretty much, an incline uphill all day long, and potentially I had overstretched a little, overstretched my calves on the way up. Probably didn't have to stretch them quite as much as I did. So I'm thinking that could have caused, but I never got it looked at. It healed. So that day at the top, everything was fine. I woke up the next morning and I had a huge, literally the size of a golf ball. It was about the size of a golf ball right on the lower part of my calf, right above my ankle. And I tried to run through it that day, and I did, but it, to a certain degree, but then I realized this wasn't gonna just go away. I had trained with an agency that was out of Phoenix, Arizona, and they had given me this machine called an ARP, which uses electrical impulses to get deep into your muscles and tendons and somewhat magically heal injuries. Professional sports players often go and use these types of machines. And so somehow through the use of that, it did take, I would say, a good week, if not a little bit more. I was able to heal that and continue on. And again, I'll never really know exactly what happened, but I do know that even today I have in my toe, one of the toes on my left foot, I have a joint that's a little bit misaligned there. And I'm sure that has something to do with that injury, but it doesn't bother me anymore. So I was really lucky to be able to heal whatever it was.
That was it. That was your last injury all the way across country?
I had pain. I had towards the end, I had some major hip pain, and that was right around by the time I got to Missouri, and I was popping about, I don't know how many, but maybe like 20 or 15 Advil a day for a while, just to decrease the inflammation. But I didn't have any other injuries, and I don't know if you remember, but I did run the majority of the way across country in Vibram 5 fingers.
I remember it very well. And when I think about you, Rosalynn, I feel somewhat guilty. I don't know if I helped your trip or I heard it, but I remember meeting you up in Ohio and your feet were just raw.
Yeah.
Raw. And I was kind of bold. I guess I said, Rosalynn, you have to wear shoes. And
well, I'll tell you what the difference was is, after I had that hip pain when it started right around that time, I realized that it was really difficult for me to run. And so I had started walking. And there's a huge difference between running in the Vibram 5 fingers and walking, because when you're running, you're striking with your forefoot. And there's a lot more padding on there than when you're walking. It's, my heel is digging into the ground, and I just realized I couldn't walk in those shoes. in the Vibrams on paved surfaces for 30 miles a day.
Mm-hmm.
So you really did. I think it enabled me to really continue the rest of my journey was partially your encouragement to just get some good sneakers, some running shoes.
I can't imagine running. So you were obviously well over 2,500 miles by the time I met you, and you did that in Vibrant Souls, which is mind-boggling. You mentioned 30 miles a day. Can you tell us kind of what your long day was and what your average day was mileage-wise?
So my longest day was 36 miles, and that was somewhere in, I believe it was in New Mexico. My plan was to do about 20 miles a day, and of course, in the beginning, I was doing anywhere around 15 to 20 miles a day, and then I decided that I wanted to see if I could increase that. So I built up over the course of about a week, I built up to my longest day, which was 36 miles. And that was quite an accomplishment. I was even thinking about it right now. It's like, I can't believe I did that. I ran 36 miles in one day. And of course, when I say run, jogging is more the term that I should use. It was slow. That probably took me at least 8 hours, to go that far. And there was lunch in between and some walking after lunch, but the majority was the slow jog.
And did you take some rest days as well?
I did. I didn't have them planned in, but there were some rest days. One of the other things that I did along the way was I stopped at youth groups and schools, and I talked to the young people about what I was doing. And one of the messages that I wanted to get across to them is that if there's something you really want to do in your life that's really important to you, some kind of dream that you have, that you can make it happen. And, I hope that I touched some hearts with that message and inspired some people. So on those days, when I did stop and speak to the young people, I generally didn't, wasn't on the road that day. And other days, for example, when my support driver, he ran in some races along the way. We actually stopped in the Grand Canyon and had an adventure there. So that was, a day off as well.
I think, and I always, every summer, there's anywhere between 15 and 30 men and women who attempt to walk or run across country. I always pick one or two every single year, meet with them as they come close to Cincinnati. And man, I'm reluctant to say that you're my favorite, because I don't want you to think that there's anything wrong with that. But I just truly felt blessed to have met you, Rosalynn, and I'm sure that you impacted a whole lot of lives. I mean, it was just such a blessing meeting you. I'm going to go back to our other screen here.
Well, I do want to say, Jim, I know I've told you this before, but that your visit meant so much to me. I probably can't explain in words how much that visit meant. It was wonderful.
Ditto. It meant the same to me. So the last question I have for you, Rosalynn, hopefully a lot of people are going to read our book, some ultra runners, some not, some, because of the 27 people who wrote chapters in this book, some are like incredible runners, that ran across for records, like Pete Kostelnick, who ran 72 miles a day across country, and Sandra V, who has the ladies record. I think hers was 56 miles a day, just unbelievable. And then there was other people who, literally didn't run or walk at all. But for anyone who's thinking about a walk or run across America, what advice would you say?
Wow, that's a tough one, because I'm sure I have advice about a variety of topics, but let me think for a minute. One, I can't help but say this. I think, if you read my chapter and have a little bit of insight into my run, it'll become obvious why I'm saying this. But one thing is, if you're going to have someone support you across the way, make sure that that person is someone that you really appreciate spending large amounts of time with.
I read your chapter and I fully understand. And I, like, as you know, since I was fortunate enough to meet with you, I met with that person, and it's not an easy job to be support for somebody running or walking across
No,
country.
it's not. And so that person, to say choose your support driver carefully, it's challenging enough to complete the experience. And then there's this other social dynamic if you have a support driver. And, don't get me wrong, I want to make sure I make it clear that my support driver did many, many wonderful things in support of this experience, and was a really valuable part of what happened. That is absolutely clear. But, there is that dynamic. So that's something to take into consideration.
Yeah, and you go into that well into your chapter. So, I mean,
Mhm.
anybody who does plan a trip across country, make sure that you focus in on Rosalynn's chapter because it's a huge part of the trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Um,
go ahead.
just something else, any words of advice? Let's see. Yeah, I think one of the things that I didn't do as much as I had now in retrospect wished that I did was to really keep a detailed journal of my experience. I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing that. There were so many reasons at the time where I was like, kind of decided not to do it, and I did. I chronicled it a bit on Facebook, but if I could go back and do it again, one of the things I would definitely do is keep a detailed personal journal about about the whole experience.
I will second that, Rosalind, because
Yeah,
I went back a couple years ago. I thought I would look at it every year, but I didn't. But in 2002 is when I ran across country, and I went, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and I pulled that journal out, and
yeah.
I didn't remember until I pulled it out again that I stopped about midway. I stopped in Kansas City, August 13th. I stopped journaling, and I was journaling every day, and I
Yeah,
regret so much that I didn't finish that.
yeah,
And
yeah, for sure.
life happens. Life happens. Like crazy things happen on your journey, on my journey, on everybody's journey, and that's what makes the book interesting. I think there's 27 different stories, and it's in the book Across America on foot, available on Amazon. What a pleasure, Rosalynn. Thanks so much for writing a chapter, and thanks for doing the interview.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate the experience.
I look forward to meeting up with you again sometime.
Definitely. Me too.